Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia, and today we're going to take a look at the historical heights of Three Kingdom characters. Now before we get started, it is important to get some context to height measurements during the Three Kingdoms period, starting with the base unit of measurement in ancient China, which is Chi, and there's also a subunit called Cun, which is 1/10 in value. Now Chi literally means ruler, and the length of such measuring rulers did change from dynasty to dynasty, but for the Eastern Han Dynasty into the Three Kingdoms period, these measuring rulers, or Chi, had a length of 23.1 centimeters, or roughly 9 inches. For a frame of reference, a acceptable height for a male during this time period was 7 Chi, which equals roughly 162 centimeters, or 5 feet 3 inches. Now, this is not an average, as we simply do not have enough data to calculate the average height for the period, but we do have idioms and writing from the period that provides references to this 7 Chi acceptable height. In essence, if you were less than this height, then you were considered short and be seen as less manly. So with all that said, let's take a look at some of the height measurements recorded down in the records of the Three Kingdoms, which detailed multiple height measurements mostly for people measuring over 7.5 Chi, as that was seen as tall back in those days. But as with everything, there are also exceptions, as the records of Three Kingdoms did have one mentioning of a short king in Zhuran, who did not meet the acceptable height of 7 Chi. So while we don't know exactly how short Zhuran was, he was definitely shorter than 162 centimeters. Then moving on to Liu Bei, who measures in at 7 Chi and 5 Cun, or 173 centimeters. And we have someone who is slightly below the average height of Chinese males today, which measures in at 174 centimeters. Next up, we have Taishi Ci, who measures in at 7 Chi and 7 Cun, or 178 centimeters, and his fellow Wu officer, Chen Wu, who also shares this height. Sadly, both generals would die young, with Taishi Ci dying of illness and Chen Wu giving his life defending Sun Quan at the Battle of Hefei. Then for the giant of the south, we have Dong Xi, who measures in at 8 Chi, or 185 centimeters. And while being this tall was a rarity in the south, it was much more common in the north, so it's not surprising to find that Zhuge Liang also measures in at 8 Chi, or 185 centimeters, given that his clan hailed from the Shandong region, which is still one of the tallest provinces by average height in China today. And joining him at 8 Chi is Zhao Yun, who hails from Changshan in the north. As a matter of fact, 8 Chi was the most commonly recorded height from the records of Three Kingdoms. As you can see here, that we have 4 more minor characters who share this height, and the main reason for this is probably due to false self-reporting. Much like today, if you are an inch off 6 feet or a few centimeters off from 180, then there's a good chance that you might report up to get to that coveted round whole number. So in the same sense, 8 Chi ended up being the most commonly recorded height in the records of Three Kingdoms. But while these characters might have been a few centimeters off, we also have records of characters who were clearly over 8 Chi. For example, Cao Cao's bodyguard, Xu Chu, was recorded to measure over 8 Chi, even though we don't know exactly how much taller he was. Similarly, Liu Biao was also recorded to measure over 8 Chi, which is probably one of the contributing factors to having him named as part of the 8 talents back in his younger days. Now moving on, we also have a few characters who measures over 190 centimeters, starting with Cao Cao's strategist Cheng Yu, who measures in at 8 Chi and 3 Cun, which puts him at 191 centimeters, or close to 6 feet 4. And in addition to Cheng Yu, administrators He Kuai and Sima Yi's grandfather, Sima Jun, were all recorded at this height, which helps to explain why the Sima clan overall were described as tall. Now lastly, while the records of Three Kingdoms did not provide exact heights for these last few characters listed at the bottom here, all of them were described as tall with the exception of Yue Jin, as he was described as short. And while tall can mean anything over 7 尺 and 5 寸, or roughly 173 centimeters, short definitely meant you were shorter than 7 尺, or 162 centimeters. And of course, the records of the Three Kingdoms is not the only historical source we have from this time period, as we also have the Book of the Late Han, which recorded Lu Zhi's height to be 8 尺 and 2 寸, which equates to 189 centimeters. Lastly, as hinted on the thumbnail, we also know Cao Cao's height, as his tomb was discovered recently, with his body intact. And since many historical documents already describe Cao Cao as short, it should come as no surprise to find out that his remains only measure him at 155 centimeters, which officially makes him the short king of the Three Kingdoms period. And even if we look back to Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel, where some of the characters' height are exaggerated to over 2 meters tall, it conservatively puts Cao Cao's height at only 7 尺, which is barely acceptable as a man, or 162 centimeters, which goes to explain that once you remove that exaggeration from the novels, having Cao Cao at 155 centimeters makes a lot of sense. Additionally, we also know Cao Cao's nephew, Cao Xiu's height, from his tomb being discovered with the body intact as well. And even Cao Xiu, who Cao Cao described as their clan's Tiannuju, or a war stud, only measured in at 171 centimeters, which pretty much confirms that the Cao clan overall were not very tall. And with that, we're going to be wrapping things up here. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this video enough to hit that like button to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!